Hello, this is the Tradesight U.S. Stocks and Futures Market Preview for Thursday, December 8th, 2016, and Friday the 9th. We don't normally do market previews Thursday night going into Friday because most of the week is wrapped up. I doubt this week will be an exception, so this will cover the next 2 days and what's left in the week. Here's a look at the ES front month futures contract. This is the daily chart of the ES. This is the broad market, the S&P 500 in futures form. Talked yesterday about the fact that we'd had this breakout. Didn't get much of a move. Pulled back. Remember how breakouts work. You get the breakout, if you've got the right technical pattern, which this is, get the breakout, pull back to retest. If you hold the next turn up, take out the highs, that's usually where you get the pop. Today we got the pop. It happened very awkwardly because it didn't happen at all for the first 2 hours of the day, which kind of left us without as many of the trades as we probably could have put on if this had done this move from the get-go. But at any rate, it did give us the move. Also point out, if I go to projection mode, we're now 8 candles up towards the secret 13. So that puts us within a week or so potentially of that signal, unless we get recycled, which is still, I don't think it's going to, it's a possibility. It depends how the days play out. So we'll see how this goes. But right here, it was a surprising move from a lot of people's perspective, but from a technical move, it's the right move, at least for that one day. We have some big things happening in the next 2 days. We're rolling the futures contracts from the December contract to the March contract. So that usually screws up the market for 2 days. That'll be tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday will feel the biggest pain. So tomorrow the volume will start to come out of the December contract. It moves into the March 2017 contract, which will be the H7 contract. When that happens, there's new numbers, new technicals. So for a day, they don't have anything really to work with. And that means on Friday, they don't typically do much. So we'll see. I'm not expecting a lot out of those 2 days. Let's go through all the majors, and then we'll look at the intraday action and see what's left in terms of economic data. So crude oil down $1, $1.08, retreating a bit after sweeping the all-time highs. Gold dead flat, closed nowhere. And so the S&P was up 29. This is the cash, 29.12. By the way, on the S&P cash index, we're now 9 candles up, so just keep that in mind. The futures are the better way to look at it, but if they bolt the cash and the futures get the signal within a day or two, that'll be more powerful. The NDX, NASDAQ 100, if I go to projection mode, it just wiped out a 9-bar startup phase that was almost there. This basically puts the NASDAQ almost exactly at, now actually a couple points above where it closed the day before Election Day. So after all this, it's pretty much flat post-election. SOX almost to new highs, up 18 points, but not quite. Biotech's huge day down in the middle of all this, down 83 points, went back down towards filling that gap. That was the election day gap. So the biotechs have given back everything since the election. We got the VIX closing up 43 cents. That was late in the day too, that it got a push, but closing still at 12.22. So the VIX is up, even though the market's heading up on what ended up being okay volume, but started out very light. Now here's the one, the trend, 0.88. And that brings the moving average down because that big number at 1.5 drops off. So we get a 0.88 to replace it. And so that puts the 10-day moving average of the trend, which is kind of covered up there. Let me look at 0.9. So remember, well, then tomorrow a low number is going to drop off. So unless we get a low reading, that'll probably move the moving average up. But if you get to 0.85, it's usually the sell signal in the broad market. NASDAQ volume, 1.9 billion. Advanced decline ratio plus 844 on the NASDAQ, plus 1600 on the New York. Google up 15.29, also recovering, still down since Election Day. Apple up $1, not much there. Amazon back up 570. Netflix up 82 cents. By the way, we talked about this yesterday. Here it is. 13 sell signal on Netflix on the daily chart. There's your secret 13. Tesla up a little bit, up $7.30, but still very near the lows for the year. TLT, now here's the one. Remember, we were talking about that buy signal, the 13 buy signal, and then it came back down anyways and swept the risk line, but it literally closed that day 2 pennies above the risk line, so it held the risk line, and now we're curling back up. So bonds are starting to come up. Ultimately, that should be bad for stocks. And of course, the Dow up. Here's the big one. Dow up 300 points because you've got stocks like American Express. And well, it's not showing the data. American Express was up big today, and Goldman Sachs, for example, up another 4 today. Now, keep in mind, this is the other interesting thing. We talk about stocks. Goldman Sachs now 9 bars towards a 13 sell signal, although that could easily get recycled. But we talk about stocks being up at the end of the year. Remember, when stocks are up late, by the time late November, December rolls around, they're up big for the year. Nobody wants to sell them. Nobody wants to lock in the tax gain. So if Goldman Sachs continues higher, for example, it's because of a lack of interest in selling this thing. Nobody wants to pay the taxes April 15th or before. And what would then happen in my mind, because you usually see this, the stocks that are up the most and close the highest at the end of the year are then pretty big candidates for selling off after that. So I'm not saying Goldman Sachs is going to keep running all the way to the end of the year, but certainly if it does and closes, let's say at 250 or something like that on December 31st, we're going to be looking at ways to play a swing short using some options on Goldman Sachs and anything else that does approximately the same thing. All right, so let's take a look at the intraday action. Remember, we'll be rolling to the other contracts on the futures here shortly. Here it is. The ES closes, opens flat. First hour was really boring. Second hour was just a little drift higher. By the time it was right when they started heading to lunch, almost 2.5 hours in, that suddenly things started moving and ran up. And most of the move of the day is actually between 12 o'clock and 2 p.m. Eastern time. That took us up 20 points on the S&P over lunch. It's very unusual. And then we went flat again for another hour, and then one last push. Of course, at that point, they're squeezing the shorts out. NASDAQ side obviously looks about the same. So surprising move on the day at the time of day that it was. Would have been nice to get that out of, right out of the gate. Now we did have some nice winners. Our top picks in CTAS right here worked. We also had JetBlue off the report, off the daily chart. Got a 13 at the Comer 13, which is what we use in the 5-minute chart. This is the seeker. Gave us the close in the high candle there at 22. So perfect exit there. And we had some other trades as well. So nothing to complain about, but it would have been nice to really get going out of the gate if you're going to get a move like that. That's about it. So let's keep in mind again, the economic data that's coming out for the rest of the week. We've got initial and continuing jobless claims. That's the weekly number, an hour before the bell. We've got natural gas inventories an hour into the market. We've got on Friday, Michigan sentiment and wholesale inventories 30 minutes into the market. That's what's left this week. But again, the focal point here is going to be that futures contract roll. It happens once a quarter. It does slow things down. Friday in particular, the first day where all the big money is playing on the new contract without the market having given up the volume technicals the day before. They tend to kind of back off. So I wouldn't be surprised if Friday's pretty dead. Then we still have all next week, which is options expiration week. It will be a triple expiration week, so that can still see some excitement. We've got a Fed meeting as well next week, and then after that, one more full week, but we do start to head into Christmas for the following weekend. Charts, as usual, brought to you by eSignal 12. If you've not yet taken a trial of our services, feel free to do so. We will help you out for a couple weeks. Have a great trading Thursday and Friday.